Hi everyone, this is chapter 2, section 3, Egypt. We will begin by understanding how geography helped shape ancient Egypt. You know that based on the geography of an area, the rivers, the mountains, the deserts, people act a different way and live a different way. Also, we're going to analyze the achievements of the Old Kingdom in Egypt. We'll see that ancient Egyptian history is divided into three. So we'll start with the Old Kingdom. We will then talk about the Middle Kingdom. We'll describe the events that brought turbulence to Egypt's Middle Kingdom, and then explain how Egypt grew strong during the New Kingdom. Terms and people that you need to know: a cataract is a waterfall. A delta is an area of marshland formed by silt deposited at the mouth of a river such as the Nile. In Lower Egypt, the Nile is going to be the most important geographical feature for Egypt. A dynasty, you guys know this, the ruling family that will rule Egypt, they will have dynastic cycles just like China had. A pharaoh is an Egyptian king who held absolute power. So pharaoh is just Egypt's way of saying king. A bureaucracy is a system of government employing different departments and levels of authority. Egypt will have a bureaucracy in its organized government, but it will be led by the pharaoh. The vizier is basically the pharaoh's right-hand man, the chief minister who supervised the business of government in ancient Egypt. Hatshepsut will be Egypt's first female ruler. She will be considered a pharaoh, not a queen, and we will talk about why. Thutmose III is Hatshepsut's stepson, pharaoh who expanded Egypt's empire to its largest extent. And then Ramses II, probably one of Egypt's most famous pharaohs, who ruled for 66 years, so a very long time, and expanded Egypt northward into Syria. How did the Nile influence the rise of the powerful civilization of Egypt? The fertile lands of the Nile Valley attracted Stone Age farmers from the Mediterranean area, from nearby hills and deserts, and from other parts of Africa. In time, a powerful civilization emerged that depended heavily on the control of river waters. The Nile is going to be very important to the Egyptian people. Here is a map of Africa, the continent of Africa. If you look right here, this is the area we're talking about when we talk about Egypt, ancient Egypt. The kingdoms of Mesopotamia are up here somewhere. Here we go, a closer map. If you notice, Upper Egypt is down here. Lower Egypt is up here. That is because the Nile River flows from south to north, incredibly different from the other rivers in the world. This is considered the delta region, that marshland that flows into the Mediterranean Sea. Egypt is wholly the gift of the Nile. Since ancient times, people have lived in a narrow band of land beside the Nile River. Yearly floods from rains in the south brought rich silt to replenish the soil. Yearly floods. Pretty much, the Nile floods predictably. They know when it's going to flood. Very rarely does it go out of that cycle. So the Egyptian people are going to consider themselves the chosen people, very special to the gods. Unlike the Sumerians, who thought that they were just slaves to the gods because the Tigris and Euphrates was so unpredictable. The Nile will be very predictable. The Egyptian people had to cooperate to build dikes, reservoirs, and irrigation channels. From this, we see an organized government. We see public works. The Nile equals rebirth. The Nile is translated into rebirth. It's approximately 4,000 miles long, which makes it the longest river in the world. The ancient Egyptians viewed themselves as very special because they had the Nile. They will develop a very distinctive and superior culture. You guys will know right away when you see something that's Egyptian, it looks different. The Nile was used for transportation. It was used for food. Remember, the flood put silt into the land, it irrigated the farmland, and it's a source of water. Everything we learned about water from chapter 1 pertains to the Nile in Egypt. Ancient Egypt was divided geographically into two parts that I just pointed out. We have Upper Egypt right here, which stretched from the Nile's first cataract, which means waterfall, to within 100 miles of the Mediterranean Sea. And then Lower Egypt is right here, which covered the Nile Delta, which is that marshy land at the mouth of the river as the river flows into the Mediterranean. So the Nile flows from south to north. About 3100 BC, Menes is the king of Upper Egypt, and he will unite Upper and Lower Egypt. He will found his capital at Memphis, where the river enters the delta. Later, rulers will use the Nile as a highway to unite north and south. Merchants used the river to exchange products from Africa, the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and I hope you're all thinking cultural diffusion. Trade leads to cultural diffusion, and the Nile certainly allows the Egyptians to trade. Egyptian history is divided into three kingdoms. Historians took a look at ancient Egyptian history and decided to split it up into three. We have the Old Kingdom, also known as the Pyramid Age, the Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom. Please notice that the dates don't exactly match up. Historians simply put a whole bunch of things that seem similar into one name. Power passed from one dynasty or ruling family to another, but the land generally remained united under powerful kings called pharaohs. During the Old Kingdom, Egypt became a centralized state. So the Old Kingdom being the first part of ancient Egyptian history, the pharaoh is viewed as a god, meaning there was a combination of organized government where the pharaoh is the head, but also religion. They were a polytheistic people, and we will talk about their gods more when we get to section 4. The pharaoh was expected to act morally, meaning he had to do what was right for his people. He ruled by democracy, a system of departments with different levels of authority in the government, and his chief minister was considered a vizier. He oversaw departments for taxes, farming, irrigation, other functions, so they truly had an organized government. Pharaohs built pyramids in the Old Kingdom, which is known as the Pyramid Age. These pyramids were built as tombs where they would live in the afterlife, and we'll talk more about the afterlife of the Egyptians when we get to their culture in the next section. The best known pyramids are the Great Pyramids that still stand at Giza. The Old Kingdom collapsed due to crop failures, power struggles, and the cost of pyramid building. Pyramids are going to take a very long time to build, and they're very expensive. After a period of disunity, the Middle Kingdom will be established. In the Middle Kingdom, drainage projects created more arable land, meaning more land for farming. The power of local aristocrats was ended. Egypt occupied gold-rich Nubia, also called Kush, to the south. Trade expanded to include the Middle East and Crete. So cultural diffusion, drainage projects for more farmland could be considered public works, good organized government, a period of disunity, but now the Middle Kingdom is established and good things are happening. And here we see Nubia to the south. They're going to travel down the Nile and trade with these people, and then they'll go up to Crete, which is a part of Greece, up here. The Middle Kingdom was also a turbulent era. The Nile did not rise as regularly as in the past, and rebellions and corruption were also problems. In 1700, Egypt is going to be invaded by the Hyksos. Their horse-drawn chariots, cultural diffusion, awed the Egyptians. The Egyptians will use them from that point forward. The Hyksos ruled for 100 years until new Egyptian leaders arose. And now we will have the New kingdom. Under ambitious pharaohs, the new kingdom grew powerful, reaching as far north as Syria and the Euphrates River in 1450 BC. So this will be the Egyptian kingdom under the new kingdom. And let's look at the pharaohs that ruled there. Egypt's first female pharaoh, and please know we're not talking about all the pharaohs that will rule Egypt, just specific ones. So the first female ruler will be Hatshepsut. She will rule as pharaoh. So this is actually a statue of her with a false beard. The beard indicated male authority, so Hatshepsut put a false one on. She held power from about 1472 BC to 1458. She encouraged trade along the Mediterranean and Red Sea. Now Hatshepsut took power because she was supposed to be the regent for her stepson Thutmose III. She kind of kept power a little longer than she was supposed to. Thutmose III was grown up and she was still considered pharaoh. It's important to note, she was considered a pharaoh, not a queen. She had absolute power in Egypt at the time from 1472 BC to 1458. Thutmose III will succeed her. It's not really known what happened to Hatshepsut, although people studying this portion of Egyptian history like to think that maybe Thutmose III had something to do with her death. We don't know that for sure. However, we do know that any mention of her, whether it be chiseled onto a building or whether it be a statue of her, basically Thutmose III tried to eliminate any mention of her in history. He must have missed something because history does know of her. So Thutmose III will succeed her. He will become pharaoh after her. A great military leader, he will expand Egypt's borders to the Euphrates River, so going even farther north. The most famous pharaoh was Ramses II, who ruled from 1279 BC to 1213. He is pretty famous. He ruled for 66 years, which is a very long time to rule. He married multiple women, had multiple children, maybe more than 100 or so. He was pretty impressed with himself. He battled the Hittites. Remember the Hittites who were the first to use iron, and he signed the oldest known peace treaty in history. He used gold from Nubia to the south to pay his army, which included many Nubian charioteers. Nubians played a prominent part in Egyptian culture during this era. After 1100 BC, Egypt will decline. It will be taken over by the Assyrians. Remember, the land bathed in blood, as mentioned in the Bible. And Persian invaders. Persians will have the biggest empire to that point. And they will conquer the Nile region and take over Egypt. The next section we'll talk about Egyptian culture.